Hi, this is Kogido, and welcome to another Through the Ages video. So in the last video, we saw the first game of my 4th round World Championships, where I finished 3rd in the 4-player game behind Weidenbaum and Gandon, so definitely not an ideal start, but it's just one game. At least I didn't finish last, so still plenty of chances for me to try to finish first in this group, and the next game is my first chance to start to try to get some points on the board, some real points, not just one, and that'll be a 3-player game between me, Gandon, and Fiantuic. So without further ado, let's take a look. In this game I'm playing first, we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. So in Age 3, there's the Hollywood as well as Charlie Chaplin, so definitely a strong combination, but that's the only theater leader. There's also some lab leaders in Einstein and Sid Meier and Bill Gates. No spaceflight or internet, though. There is Manhattan Project plus Winston Churchill, but also Gandhi, so military might be good, but might run into issues against Gandhi. There's also a Red Cross along with Ocean Liner Service. Important to keep that combo in mind. In Age 2, like I said, there's Ocean Liner Service and also Maria, very strong combo. There's a Suez Canal too, but no Cook. Those are the two power wonders in the game. There's also both Bach and Shakespeare to potentially lead into a theater strategy in Age 3. So I think theaters are definitely quite viable in this game. There's also both Nobel and Newton to help with the science strategy that was aforementioned, as well as Robespierre for military actions. In Age 1, I like looking to see which leaders like to be elected early and which like to be elected late. In this case, Gutenberg, Barbarossa, and Eleanor all like to be elected early, where late, I mean, they're all transitional leaders, whereas Isabella, Leonardo, and Saladin can be elected early well. Genghis Khan is kind of situational when it comes to early or late, so pretty balanced when it comes to that. There are a number of strong Age 1 wonders as well to get first, especially Forbidden City and Universitas. Great Wall is also good. Machu Picchu can be quite strong if situational, so it's alright to pass up the AJ wonder as well. In my case, though, I don't pass up the AJ wonder. I think these aren't very good yellow cards. Aristotle not great to get first. Library and Pyramids are both very strong wonders, and it definitely comes down to one of them. And I think normally I would take the Pyramids here, but there is one reason why I took the Library instead of a particular reason. So if we look at what my opponents are likely to take, I figured Gandon would probably take Aristotle plus whichever wonder I didn't take. Both of the wonders would work very well with Aristotle. And then I thought Fiantuic probably would take Ashoka plus a yellow card. Ashoka is available for one simple action less than these leaders. These leaders are not typically valued that highly by people, and getting Ashoka in third position with a yellow card I think is a good start. But if that all happens, then that means that Cleopatra will end up being available for me on one simple action next turn. That would be 1, 2, there would be at least 4, 1, 2, yeah. It would be Aristotle plus Ashoka at least would be taken, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Cleopatra would then drop down exactly 5 to 1 simple action, which means that I really want Cleopatra to be my leader. I think I value Cleopatra above most players in general. I think she can be extremely strong, just you have to be careful with her and plan her out. And when you have Cleopatra, well, I think Cleopatra can work very well with Pyramids, where you just use her to build Pyramids early and get the civil actions early. I think the best wonder for her is probably the Library, because you can build a mine the first turn and the first step of the Library, and then the next turn you can build the second step with the 3 rocks plus the Cleo bonus. So Library just works very well with Cleo and makes her very easy to maintain for a large number of turns, which is where she can really show her strength. So that's why I picked Library here. And as expected, Gandon takes Aristotle plus the Pyramids, which is a very strong combo. And Fiantuic also, as I thought, takes Ashoka plus a yellow card. Decides to take the Cultural Heritage over the Frugality, which is, you know, I think Frugality maybe is normally thought to be a bit better because it doesn't require a civil action to play. But it is also true that with Ashoka, Fiantuic may already have more than enough food, whereas he might really want some science to be able to play text, to play the Ashoka resources, so that makes sense. Age 1 begins. And as stated previously, I do my plan where I take and elect Cleopatra and build a mine plus the first step of Library. Engineering Genius may be slightly worth considering because of how powerful it is, but they get 3 civil actions, not really a consideration. Unfortunately, it's just a bit unfortunate that Gandon will end up getting Engineering Genius with Pyramids, but I think that was unavoidable here. And Gandon, as expected, takes the Engineering Genius, which is strong with Pyramids. Notably, though, instead of building mine Gandon elects Aristotle and increases population, so it's choosing to delay this mine a little bit. Definitely a surprising choice. Perhaps Gandon is wanting to maybe finish pyramids as possible, so if he built the mine, then next turn he would have 3 rocks, which is 1 short of finishing pyramids. Which doing it this way means he can finish pyramids next turn to get the civil action earlier. So he's basically getting a civil action at least 1 turn earlier, probably 1 turn earlier, but at the cost of missing out on 2 rocks, which is maybe a bad and equal deal. I probably still would have built the mine, especially since there's a chance maybe that a rock development could be revealed. But I can also understand valuing the civil actions more. Fantric elects Ashoka, builds a mine, and takes Alchemy to get the Ashoka bonus going. Alchemy probably better than Irrigation, although as stated previously, there is some Irrigation synergy in this game. So I think Irrigation could also be justified here. But maybe with Ashoka, Fantric already has Feed and Rocks, needs Science, so with Ashoka that definitely makes sense. Notably, though, Fantric chooses to pass up on an Age A wonder, doesn't take the Acropolis, even though I think this is a game where Acropolis could be strong with the Theater synergy, which might make it a little harder for Fantric to get out of corruption. But maybe Fantric is hoping to get one of those strong Age 1 wonders mentioned previously. Anyway, I build 1 stage of the library to use Cleo's resource. Could have maybe built a lab, but I think that there's 2 reasons why I think probably in general it's better to build the library before the lab. I mean, you lose out on 1 science, but you gain an extra population, more flexibility with it, which I think can be quite valuable, especially for, you know, developments, religion, or warfare. But also in this particular case, we can see there's a printing press on the row, which I'm thinking that I might want to get. There's also a fair amount of printing press energy in this game with Leonardo into potentially Shakespeare, into potentially Hollywood. So I definitely was thinking about getting a printing press. Now, on my turn, after increasing my population to get out of corruption, I take the irrigation instead of the printing press. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, as I think there's also a lot of irrigation synergy in this game, as I said previously, Barbarossa, Machu Picchu, Ocean Liner Service. So I think irrigation is also a strong card here. But I also thought that I was kind of hoping to maybe get both irrigation and printing press, because I think irrigation, not only is there synergy for it in this game, but it's also a great card with the printing press, because the printing press can be a little population intensive, especially if you want to put multiple of them along with your lab. And so irrigation giving you extra population in the early game can definitely help out with that. And I felt that of the 2 cards, the irrigation was more likely to be taken by an opponent, partly because the printing press will still be on 2 civil actions for Gandon. Fantric might have some trouble getting out of corruption. Also, Fantric already took the alchemy, so with already having the alchemy, taking the printing press too probably doesn't make much sense. So I thought that Gandon maybe would take the irrigation if it was on 1 civil action, but maybe not when it's on 2, maybe not the printing press on 2 civil actions. So I thought taking the irrigation first made it more likely that I would get both of them, and I kind of wanted both of them. Iron, even though it's early, I was not able to take it, I think, without being in corruption. Well, I guess I could have, like, built a warrior to take the iron, but I don't think that's worth it. And I didn't seed because I didn't want to reveal resource event. Both of these cards are also a little, you know, risky to play anyway. Anyway, along with Barbarians and Dark Ages, I also draw a bonus card in the Trade Routes Agreement. Gandon does indeed finish the pyramids this turn and takes that iron. Should be able to play it next turn with Aristotle. Maybe won't have enough rocks to upgrade it, though. But I think, you know, if Gandon delayed the mine last turn in order to build the pyramids, you know, kind of have to follow through with that plan. Fantric takes the masonry to get the full Ashoka bonus, increases population, and builds a lab to get out of corruption. And with his last civil action, he takes the breakthrough. I think that definitely makes sense for Fantric. Needs all the science he can get with Ashoka. But I was glad that he didn't take the printing press. I didn't want to see it again. My plan for this turn will leave me with only 1 or 2 blue cubes here, so if I reveal the resource event, it would screw up my plan for the turn. So instead I offer a trade routes agreement to Fantric. I thought that, you know, with the irrigation, I definitely would like to be able to transform food into resources. Of the 2, I figured that with Gandon delaying his mine, that Fantrick would be more likely to take the trade routes agreement, but he ended up not doing so. Anyway, I finished the library, as said, in order to spend clear as resource, and also obviously having it finished is great. That, and then in order to get out of corruption, well, okay, so I increased my population to get out of corruption, and then take the printing press for reasons stated previously. That leaves me with one civil action left. Genghis Khan could be considered, but I thought there was a lot of potentially strong leaders for me: Saladin, Barbarossa, Leonardo, so I didn't feel the need to preemptively take a leader without knowing if it would be that good. I don't have any tactics yet, so I don't know if I could even use them well. But in addition, I think the Rich Land could be quite an important card for me, because Gandon took the first copy of Iron, second copy's on the row, I'm not taking it. I wouldn't be able to take it without either not spending clear as resource or being in corruption. So that means that Fantrick will almost certainly take the second copy of Iron, meaning I'm going to have to aim for coals this game, and having the Richland in your hand makes it a lot easier to get to coals, because you only need to save up 4 resources to upgrade your first coal mine. I discarded the Barbarians because with the printing press and the library, it looked pretty reasonably likely that I would have the most culture. And I also, didn't have a plan to increase in strength. I didn't have a tactic or anything yet. I ended up drawing the Uncertain Borders, another strength event, and the Legion tactic. Nice to have a tactic in hand. Gandon does something else interesting here. Instead of finally building his third mine, instead he spends the resources on a second warrior. This, I think, is probably a little more questionable than delaying it for the library, for the pyramids, I mean. Gandon, I guess, wants to... Well, we might see what plan Gandon has, yeah, when he reveals the heavy cavalry tactic, and then along with the drama and the swordsman, takes Genghis Khan. So, clearly, Gandon's plan is next turn to finish the heavy cavalry tactic and then play Genghis Khan. Which definitely is a lot of strength immediately. Perhaps Gandon is hoping that at least one of his opponents, that this is an early enough strength push that at least one of his opponents won't be able to defend themselves adequately, and then maybe has an aggression in his hand. I think with literally no events having been seeded yet, the event deck moving extremely slowly, I think that the only way this play would make sense is if there's an aggression in hand. And so if Gandon is hoping that he can get an aggression off, this play might make sense. That being said, I think that delaying this mine this long for this strength push when when the event deck, no events have been seeded yet, does feel kind of questionable to me. It is true that Gandon is able to take this rich land and the urban growth in hand after electing Aristotle. Now, the cost of electing... Now, Gandon has to elect Genghis Khan this turn in order to open up hand space for both of these yellow cards. That being said, obviously the cost of that is not being able to get any more science out of Aristotle. I already got a fair amount of science out of Aristotle, at least. Well, I got 3 science, which is decent. But there's also a lot of yellow cards to take with civil actions, even with having the 5th civil action so early, still spending a lot of civil actions and yellow cards. Now, the rich land will mean that next turn Gandon will be able to build a 3rd warrior and build his 3rd mine. So delaying the mine is kind of costing him only 1 rock, because he can build it with rich land, but it also costs a civil action to take the rich land, so it's like spending a civil action on 1 rock. I understand Gandon's plan of pushing strength and maybe aiming to get an aggression off, but I think, especially this early in the game, it feels too risky to me. It does mean that Fantrick and I both have to respect the strength push, obviously, and find some way of winning it. Fantrick, for now, though, just upgrades a lab and increases population to get out of corruption, and takes an iron mentioned previously. So there's a Knights on the row, there is maybe Saladin or Barbarossa, definitely some options to gain strength on the row. By doing it this way, Fantrick also leaves Saladin on 2 civil actions for me, notably, which Saladin is definitely a leader that I was considering taking, so that will make it harder for me to get a nice replacement leader for sure. Anyway, as for my turn, I offer the trade rules agreement again to Fantrick, and this time Fantrick accepts. I figured that maybe, especially after Gandon pushing strength, that Fantrick, not only does Gandon, since last turn when I offered that, Gandon is showing that he wants to push strength, and Fantrick got the 2nd copy of Iron, so I figured with those 2 changes happening, Fantric might very well accept the pact this time. Again, I didn't want to seed, partly because I wasn't confident in my strength, so I wanted to keep the event deck moving slowly, and partly because, again, mostly because my plan for this turn, once more, will be to end with 1 or 2 blue keeps here. And I also think this should be a potentially a good pact for me as well because of my irrigation. Anyway, on my turn, I think there are a couple options here. I mean, I could take the knights, but I have an infantry tactic in my hand, so I probably don't want to. I could take one of these leaders. Both Saladin and Barbarossa could potentially help me with strength, and Barbarossa in particular, obviously great with irrigation. I think I have highly considered Barbarossa. I think it would be perfectly justifiable to take Barbarossa here. I think that would be a fine line, but I chose to take the Universitas instead. The nice thing about the Universitas is that it makes it a lot easier for me to spend Cleo's resources. We can see on this turn I'm able to increase my population and build one siege of the Universitas to just barely get out of corruption. And the Universitas gives a clear way. Next turn I can spend another of Cleo's resources. Next turn I can spend another of Cleo's resources to finish Universitas. And then if I have Cleo free for the following turn after that, I'll be able to build a printing press. Doing it this way just makes it means that I'll be able to keep Cleopatra basically for the entirety of Age 1 and use her resources every turn in a useful way. So I think whenever you can do that, Cleopatra just becomes such a strong leader because you got that extra resource on turn 2, and she can just really help you power things out, especially in a case like this where normally it's hard to get finish Universitas on bronze mines because it costs 9, but with Cleopatra it basically costs 6, and with Cleopatra plus a trade route agreement, well, I didn't use a trade route agreement this turn because I need to increase my population, but next turn I will, so it'll cost like 5 rocks basically and 1 food, and that's just a really, really good deal. So I thought that even though I think Saladin or particularly Barbarossa would be good leaders to take here, and I can understand it, I thought that Universitas with Cleopatra was just so strong, and also makes up for the fact that I missed out on iron. It also will help me a lot with being on printing presses. It'll mean that I'll have 3 science income just for my windows alone, which will make it a lot easier for me to operate off of 1 or 2 printing presses as my science solution. So all those factors together just made me value that, and I thought that even with passing up these leaders, I should be able to get probably Leonardo was who I was aiming for at this point, who would definitely be a good leader for me. So I thought that with the Legion tactic in my hand, which I'll build a second warrior this turn, but next turn I can build another warrior and play the Legion tactic. That'll put me at 5 strength, which will be enough to defend against Gandon, who'll have 7 strength. So I also wasn't too worried about strength, at least in the next few turns. I draw a Rebellion. Gandon does build that 3rd warrior, and builds the 3rd mine finally with the rich land. And with his remaining 2 civil actions, he takes an alchemy. With having delayed science so long, it'll definitely be helpful for Gandon to get this alchemies going to make up for that science delay. And with his last civil action, preemptively develops the iron, planning to upgrade some irons next turn, it seems. That perhaps suggests, though, note that Gandon will be 1 science short from playing Swordsman next turn unless there's help from developments, which means that 7 strength may be all that Gandon can muster for at least 2 more turns. Fantric seeds, the first seed in the game, coming with only 18 cards left in the deck. Reveals the development of Warfare. Definitely Gandon getting punished here for building the 3rd warrior himself last turn, so no one seeding until here ended up really hurting Gandon, means that he probably can't usefully use this development of Warfare. Fantric and I, though, are both able to use it nicely. Fantric increases population and takes Barbarossa. Is able to use Barbarossa to build a knight without spending civil actions, is also able to take the Taj Mahal because he replaced his leader this turn. Taj Mahal should be a nice rock sink, especially since he doesn't have as a little short on civil action, so taking it for 0 is nice and giving him a way to spend the rocks that he'll have with iron. And with building the knight, Fantric is also able to play the phalanx, so the Remnant of Warfare, definitely perhaps the best possible event for Fantric on this turn, because if it weren't for that, he wouldn't have enough military actions to build these units and play the phalanx, so he might have only been on 4 strength, which would have potentially, Gandon could have tried an aggression in that case. So this event was really good for Fantric and really bad for Gandon. Um, it is, however, also good for me. Not as good, since I had enough rocks for the warrior anyway, but definitely still nice to save those. I'm able to play the Legion, so while I'm weakest, I'm at least protected from aggressions from both my opponents. They could, and even if they try to double aggression, I have the bonus card to protect from that. I also build another stage for the Universitas to spend Cleo's resource. I'm also able to use the Trader's Agreement on this. That leaves me with 3 civil actions left. There are a few options here. I think I could, for example, take the bread and circuses. However, there's still 4 developments. One of these could definitely be development of religion. There's still both copies of theology in the deck. I also have knowledge of rebellion, so if I don't see that, I know that it'll be fine if I have unhappy workers. So I think this bread and circuses, there's also not Pierre in the game, as we saw previously. So anything with bread and circuses is probably a little too risky to take here when you could take it and then you have the religion and you feel a little bad. There's some other possible cards here, but I think what I ended up doing was just upgrading my farms. I think, especially when you're on irrigation, and in my case, I'm not getting Machu Picchu or Barbarossa. Maybe I'll get Ocean Liner Service, but that's obviously an in-demand wonder. So I might just be living off of irrigations as my food solutions for most of the game. And I think when you're in that situation, you do want to get them going early. This is a little later than you would like to do anyway. Obviously, I had stuff to spend Cleo's resources on. Maybe an indication that Cleo has some anti-synergy with irrigation because you want to get the irrigations early, but you want to spend Cleo's resources on urban buildings and wonders. So something to keep in mind for the future, perhaps, but in the case of this turn, I think this is a good thing to do. I think not taking any cards from the road doesn't really, well, yeah, it doesn't. Machu Picchu is not good for my opponents because they're not getting irrigation, so it doesn't really make a difference in terms of cost of cards for my opponents. It's just something that I wanted to do for myself to get my food going quicker. I draw an inhabited territory. Being on irrigations, definitely something I could potentially look to seed. Gandon upgrades an iron mine and takes the Great Wall. Strong Wonder with Genghis Khan for sure. Will make it a bit easier for him to transition out of Genghis eventually on H2. So makes sense to me. Should be able to build it relatively easily being on iron mines. And does end up taking another yellow card, so Gandon has taken several yellow cards so far in this game. That's a benefit, of course, of finishing the pyramids so early. And should be able to spend these urban growths on alchemies. That'll make it easier for him to build an alchemy directly, too, if he wants to. Fantrick seeds the second card. I think both of these cards have been seeded by Fantrick. Gandon, perhaps, having done the strength push, might have wanted to seed more to get the event deck moving quickly, but perhaps didn't draw any that he wanted to seed. Reveals the development of Civil Life. Fantrick uses it to develop the Masonry for 1 science less. This allows him to upgrade this lab for 1 rock less. Also takes the bread and circuses, which plays the cultural heritage before it's lost at the end of the age, and takes a copy of reserves. This you know, only being on 4 civil actions, taking reserves is a little painful. On the other hand, Fantrick does have Barbarossa, which we'll see he uses Barbarossa's ability now on the second night. And next turn, he could potentially play the reserves for food, and to use Barbarossa's ability another time. So with Barbarossa, I think this reserves, I understand. I think it's a pretty good card, even though it's a good card. It's just civil action intensive. On my turn, I decided to cancel the pact. Again, I'm not going to seed. I don't want to seed. My plan is going to end with me not wanting to reveal a resource event. I was also feeling that I was reaching the point where the pact wasn't too useful to me because I was probably going to just want to use my food on population. And I thought that with Fantrick having Barbarossa, being able to transform rocks into food was maybe a little too good for him. I mean, he won't necessarily need it next turn with the reserves, but maybe after that, if he gets another source of food or something, it might start being really good for him. And like I said, I just felt that myself. I didn't really want it anymore. I didn't want to seed, so the political action cost wasn't too important for me either. I mean, maybe I could have kept it out of the hopes that I could find a use for it in the future. Because it is true that Fantrick will probably be on 0 food after his next turn. But on the other hand, it also means that, no. Yeah, so maybe I could consider keeping it, but I think that the pack probably kind of ran its course for both of us at that point. I'm not sure if Fantrick ever even used it. He might not have. Anyway, take Leonardo. Age is about to end, so I need to take a replacement leader. Pretty fortunate for me that Leonardo is the one available here and not Isabella, for sure. Because he's definitely going to be a lot better for me than Isabella would have been, probably. Anyway, I decide to build a printing press here instead of finishing the Universalis. It's basically an equivalent amount of science and culture, because Leonardo means this printing press represents 2 science. But the reason why I chose the printing press over the Universalis is because with my last civil action, I'm taking the engineering genius. I could, consider the frugality too. This would also be a good card to take, but the engineering genius obviously will make it a lot cheaper to finish this Universalis. If I play it, it will mean that the Universalis will have basically ended up costing me 6 for 3 food, 3 rocks and 1 food, which would be really good. So I thought that the engineering genius was just a bit better than the frugality in here. So I can't use the engineering genius on the printing press, obviously, so I played that this turn. Because I have so much science, I ended up discarding the Dark Ages. Thought that would probably... I mean, there's also a point of view that having more science income means you can recover easier from the Dark Ages, but it just felt a little too risky for me. I thought that these 2 cards are Rebellion. If I can plan around it knowing that it's in the deck, so it could be good for me. Neither of my opponents have Happy Faces yet, although they have solutions in their hand, but I thought that it could potentially be hit one of them. And then Habitat Territory, I thought that being on Irrigations, this could be really good for me. And I draw another tactic and a border conflict. Gandon offers an open borders agreement to Fantrick, who accepts. A little disappointed it wasn't offered to me and instead to my 2 strong opponents. Maybe Gandon just wanted to make it harder for me to defend and to get strength going. Since I think that I probably have a better economy than my opponent. Well, I don't have the iron, so... Anyway, though. Gandon upgrades a lab with the urban growth and builds 1 stage of the Great Wall. Takes the reserves for 2 civil actions. Definitely heavy civil action cost, but Gandon is really low on science, so probably can't really afford to take any of these technologies. So instead, he just takes yellow cards with his civil actions. Yeah, no reason to increase population yet because Gandon is... Because, there's no risk of rats before Gandon's turn. On the other hand, using the civil action this turn on age 1 maybe would be better than using on the rich land when possibly there will be more powerful age 2 cards available next turn that Gandon could spend the civil action on. But the rich land will also be directly helpful for him next turn. Will enable him to upgrade both mines next turn, so it will be a good card for him. Age 2 begins. Fantrick seeds. All 3 cards so far in the event deck have been seeded by Fantrick. Reveals the development of crafts. Fantrick now builds the arena to get out of Revolt. Takes a cartography, a suggestion that Fantrick has seeded some colonies, which is obviously also good with Barbarossa, and builds 1 stage of the Taj Mahal to get out of corruption. Does pass up on the Code of Laws, though. I decided to seed the Rebellion. Again, I'm planning to be out of... I'm planning to fix my Happy Faces this turn, and so I felt that maybe I could get it to hit Gandon at least. But I end up drawing something that changes my plans a bit, revealing something that changes my plans a bit, which is Development of Science. I guess another reason I did want to seed was because there was a chance that if I revealed a science event like this one, I would be able to play the Monarchy immediately, which I wanted to do. I'll talk about that in a second. So that was the reason to seed. I guess maybe in retrospect, seeding the Rebellion was a bit risky, though, because if I take the Monarchy as I am, then I might end up being hit by the Rebellion, potentially. So, perhaps for that reason, I should have seeded the Inhabited Territory instead. But with Fantrick having cartography, though, the Inhabited Territory also felt quite risky and like I might be unlikely to win it. Border Conflict, obviously, can't, very hard to seed when I'm weakest right now. So, I guess among those, the Rebellion was the least risky card, perhaps. I did want to play the Monarchy, even though it means that I'm open for Rebellion. Is also true to the Rebellion event. It's also true that Gandon and Fantrick, maybe they won't both seed, and even if they do both seed, there would only be a 1 in 5 chance that the rebellion would actually be revealed during my turn. So I thought that chances were pretty low that the rebellion would actually be revealed during my turn. So I thought getting the monarchy out a turn earlier was more important than building the theology to fix my happy faces. Now, one cost of this, though, is it means that in order to get out of corruption, I have no choice but to build the Universal Laws without using the Engineering Genius. So, that's definitely unfortunate. It means that the Engineering Genius, I might not be able to play this game. I mean, maybe I'll be able to get it with, I mean, probably not the Suez Canal, but it's possible. Maybe the Ocean Liner Service if I get it early or something, and maybe the Kremlin if I get a good chance for it. So there are possibilities, but it definitely makes it a lot harder to use it, but I didn't want to... So technically using it here would have saved me 1 rock, because I would have been in corruption, but I would have saved 3 rocks. But I thought that the chances that I might find an opportunity to use it in the future, especially on the Ocean Liner Service, which obviously would be really good for me with irrigations, I thought that I wanted to leave myself open for that possibility, and giving that up wasn't worth saving 1 rock for me. We can see, though, that I am definitely leaving myself extremely vulnerable to a rebellion if both of my opponents happen to seed, so that could definitely, you know, that could definitely be, a slightly lower than 1 in 5 chance for me to perhaps lose the game on the spot. But on the other hand, maybe doing it this way will make my opponents not think that there's a rebellion, and maybe Gandon, you know, won't fix his happy faces for next turn or something, but it's definitely a huge risk I'm taking here. But I did feel that the chances of the rebellion being revealed were low enough, and the value of playing the monarchy this turn was so high. You know, it gives me another draw, it gives me another civil action a turn earlier, meant that I was willing to take this risk. And even if I do get hit by the rebellion, you know, it's not totally game over, although it would obviously be really bad. I draw a raid, an independence declaration, and a conquistador's tactic. So, you know, I was definitely looking forward to what my opponents did after I decided to seed the rebellion. But Gandon ends up not seeding. Again, Gandon has not seeded any card so far in this game, so that didn't totally surprise me, but that was one reason why I was a little more confident playing it risky like this. Instead of seeding, Gandon upgrades both iron mines and increases population to get out of corruption, and takes a breakthrough and builds another stage of the Great Wall. So definitely, as I said previously, a lot of yellow cards being taken by Gandon, but because Gandon is so low in science, it makes sense. Can't really afford to take a lot of techs. Fantrick does seed, reveals the development of planning. The options are trade routes, markets, and religion. I was definitely very happy to see this religion here. Fantrick, on his for his part, is able to upgrade 2 iron mines and plays like cartography. So definitely a heavy suggestion that there's some colonies on the deck. Notably doesn't take the strategy, even though it's on 1 civil action. On my turn, I was very fortunate, shall we say, that Nobel happened to be available. I mean, I don't see it, you know, and the territory looks unlikely for me to win with cartography and Barbarossa. The 2 strength events also, it looked like I was probably going to be weakest for the foreseeable future at least, but definitely getting Nobel was this early is really good. Nobel is perhaps the best H2 leader to get early. It's at least close. And in my situation in particular is really good, because my biggest weakness right now, which I didn't do a post-H2 breakdown, but basically, because of my Universitas and Leonardo, I have the most science income. I also have more food income going than my opponents. The culture is kind of close, but I have less rocks, but my main weakness is definitely my strength, and Nobel helps me a lot with that. I guess I wasn't really discussing my strength much last turn. Fantrick last turn was at 10 strength, which I was vulnerable to an aggression from Fantrick last turn. I just didn't really have a good way to avoid that. I didn't really have a good way to increase my strength last turn. So I was kind of risking it. Now, at least, you know, with my 3rd military action, I thought that I would be able to defend myself with 2 bonus cards. So especially with library helping me keep extra cards, maybe Fantrick would be too afraid to do an aggression. Maybe it just didn't have one. Regardless, though, the fact that I have Nobel this turn definitely helps me a significant amount. It means that after I play the Justice System that I also took on Justice System, maybe I learned my lesson from the 4-player game I discussed previously. Pretty important tech to have with Monarchy, just that 6 civil action makes a huge difference. I then switched to Nobel, putting me up to 7 strength, which now makes me completely safe from any aggressions from Fantrick. Now, the unfortunate thing, though, while I do think the Justice System is important to play, it also means that next turn I'll be only 1 science short of playing the strategy, which would also definitely be a nice card for me to have. So I was a little sad about that. That being said, though, 7 science is just enough to play a coal next turn if a coal is revealed, which I was a lot happier about. Now, the question here is what to do with my last civil action. I could still take the strategy. That would cost me corruption. Maybe that's okay. Although, you know, especially being on bronze mines, I think it's super extra important to avoid corruption. But instead, I thought of another way to avoid corruption, and also, perhaps even more importantly, to avoid the rebellion that I seeded, which was to build a second temple. Not usually something you want to do, but like I said, in this case, the temple kinda only costs me 1 rock, because I would be in corruption if I didn't build it, and it saves me from being in rebellion. I used up all my science on the Justice System, which I was willing to do because I'm able to avoid the rebellion by doing it like this. This is maybe a pretty strong tell that there is a rebellion in the deck, but perhaps Gandon would have suspected that anyway, or been afraid of that. I mean, Fantrick also seeded a bunch of events and is safe from a rebellion, so Gandon probably would have fixed his happy faces regardless. And so that protects me from the rebellion, like I said, gets me out of corruption, and also gives me potentially like some amount of extra culture from the temple, which definitely is not nothing. As for the cards I keep in my hand, I think I toss the strength events and the raid. Yeah, I tossed the border conflict. The Independence Declaration I figured I could maybe seed if I don't win any colonies or something. I dished the colony that I had because, again, Fantrick looked to be more likely to win colonies, much more likely to win colonies than me. That's why I ditched the colony. I figured that maybe with Nobel I had some chance of getting up strength so I could see the border conflict. I do get a very fortunate draw here of 2 bonus cards, which could definitely help me out a lot, especially with the colonies Fantrick is likely to have seeded. Gandon finishes the Great Wall, going up to 10 strength, and goes up to 12 strength by upgrading 2 warriors to swordsmen, so he is now the strongest in preparation for these events, and also takes the Constitutional Monarchy. Might be a little hard for him to work up the science for that. Probably would have liked to be able to take the Breakthrough as well, for example, but wasn't able to fit that into his turn. Maybe he could potentially even do a revolution next turn if there's no resource event revealed. Fantrick seeds. And turns out that the top card in the deck was that rebellion. So the fact that I was definitely playing with fire earlier and leaving myself with 2 unhappy workers, knowing the rebellion is in the deck, but I end up not being punished, never punished. Fantrick takes a cannon, which perhaps he has a tactic already, but perhaps he just, there wasn't a better card that made him not want to take this to make sure he has it, and finishes the Taj Mahal to get some culture protection going. Does this instead of upgrading the Iron Mine there, notably. And with his last civil action, takes a Breakthrough for some extra science, which he could definitely use. I seed that card was the, what card was that? I can't remember anymore, unfortunately. Anyway, though, I reveal a card that I obviously had no knowledge about, but was very happy to see. This Scientific Breakthrough, which helps me a ton more than it helps my opponents. Means that I could have played the strategy after all, but I had the coal anyway, which I want at least as much as the strategy. Definitely want to get some coal upgrades going so I can fix my resource if I fix my resource income and find a way to get more strength, I will basically have no weaknesses in my civilization. So even though it costs 3 civil actions, I think that's well worth it to get it a turn earlier. The question is just what to spend my last civil action on. I think there are a couple of notable options. I think navigation could definitely be considered. Fantrick is highly suggesting that there are colonies in the deck. Now that I have these extra bonus cards too, I could definitely aim to win some colonies with the navigation. The yellow cards could definitely also be useful. The reserves is particularly notable because next turn I'll have 10 rocks. So if I play the reserves for rocks, I would be able to upgrade both coal mines next turn potentially. I end up, though, just increasing my population. I think I was still, for a couple of reasons, I was still a little civil action conscious, and it was also, you know, it makes me much less vulnerable to rats. I think I thought that with me being on irrigation and both of my opponents only having 1 food, rats definitely seem like a very plausible event to be in the deck. And it hitting me for 6 would be kind of a disaster. So in order to play around rats more, I decided to increase my population, even though I do think both the navigation and the reserves could potentially be very powerful cards for me. This is just a bit of a safer play. Which I think also makes sense. I was feeling pretty good about my position at this point. I have good culture income. At this point, my economy is looking very good. My irrigations maybe will run out of steam at some point, but my rocks and science are both going to look excellent. The only issue is my strength, but I'm not that far behind. I'm more than able to defend myself. So I was feeling pretty good about my position, and I think I was just playing it a bit safe here. As for the cards I keep, I think I keep all the bonus cards and the tactic, yeah. And I draw a Crime Wave, an Iconoclasm, and a Ravages of Time. Ganon Seeds reveals, and there was indeed a rat from the deck, and it was the next card. So the event deck, the timing of the events in this event deck have been extremely fortunate for me. No doubt about that. Anyway, Ganon uses the Urban Growth to build a second alchemy directly. Unfortunately, the turn after the scientific breakthrough was revealed. So the event deck, contrary to me, the event deck has been quite unkind to Ganon in this game. Ganon does take Bach, though. Definitely a good synergy with the dramas that he has, and with the Hollywood coming. And Ganon then takes a Cavalryman for 34 actions. Heavy cost, but it is a good card to have, especially once he replaces Genghis Khan with Bach. And Ganon probably didn't value any of the other cards. I mean, the efficient upgrade, maybe with farm upgrades eventually. Maybe the reserves could be nice, but definitely the Cavalryman is also an important card to have. Especially, even though Fantrick is on Knight, so maybe you could expect to be able to get at least one of the copies of Cavalryman, but maybe Ganon just wanted to ensure that he had it. Fantrick Seeds reveals a vast territory. I think so. I ended up bidding only 6, and so Fantrick is able to win it for relatively cheaply. The reason being, I could have, if I bid 2 warriors, I am able to rebuild both of them. So I could have bid up to 7 potentially, but the problem with that was, even if I did rebuild 2 warriors and be on 7 strength, I would lose all my bonus cards, which would mean that I would not be able to defend against an aggression from Ganon or Fantrick, especially Ganon. And I thought that you know, right after you've colonized is when you're most at risk, because your opponent knows that you spent a lot of bonus cards into your colony. So I thought the chances would have been actually pretty high that Ganon would have tried to aggress me if I had won the colony for 7. So I wanted to make sure to at least keep behind this bonus card. But anyway, Fantrick was able to then win it for 6. Is able to play the Republic this turn. Probably would have preferred the Con Month, but the Republic is available now. Just means you'll have to find some other source of military actions. Takes a Suez Canal, suggesting there's a colony in this deck. Maybe the Autonomous even for the military action. And uses Barbarossa's ability, thanks to vast territory, able to build another knight. And adopts the heavy cavalry tactic. This makes him strongest. It does mean that he won't draw any cards this turn, though. And spends his last civil action playing the reserves. For Rock, notably. I see the Ravages of Time. There's a few things to talk about. So, Ganon having Pyramids and Fantrick having Taj Mahal, I thought were both very nice targets for the Ravages. Obviously, losing the civil action from Pyramids could be a big deal for Ganon. And for Fantrick, it basically turns the Taj Mahal into, you know, only 2 culture per turn, which, you know, is not that, you know, it's not that big a deal perhaps, but it's still, you know, bad. And I think that the library is a pretty good card to lose. It kind of starts running out of steam towards the late game anyway, so replacing these effects with 2 culture per turn is arguably at least a side grade. Anyway, I reveal the international negotiations. At least it's revealed on my turn, so I can choose what to give Fantrick. And it's a little bit of an interesting decision, I think, because I don't have any food, so it was only between rocks and science, both of which I have a fair amount of. But at the end, I decided to give him the science, I think. Yeah, give him the science. I figured that, thanks to the scientific breakthrough and me having to be in coal mines and upgrading them, you know, it takes a pretty long time to upgrade them. I thought that the rocks would probably be a bigger pain point for me, whereas the science I'm kind of swimming in at the moment. And Fantrick doesn't, you know, already played his government, doesn't, you know, Fantrick, probably if I give him rock, he might have some corruption issues, but probably not. He can just finish the Suez Canal. It doesn't make a difference to him finishing the Suez Canal, but it would let him, for example, finish the Suez Canal and upgrade an iron mine if he wanted to do that. So the rock could potentially help out Fantrick. Obviously, the science helps him out a lot as well, especially being on alchemies. I thought that they're probably about equally as important for Fantrick, whereas for me, I thought that the rock was more important than the science, so that's why I gave him the science. Anyway, after upgrading the coal mine, now I kind of have a lot of civil actions and not that much to spend them on. There are some notable cards in the row, and I think the most notable for me is the Rifleman, with me already having 3 infantry, and obviously the Conquistador's tactic. The Rifleman seemed like a pretty great card for me. What I spend the rest of my civil actions on is upgrading a theology and taking the sufficient upgrade that I'll be able to use on my last coal mine. I think the efficient upgrade is definitely a very nice card for me to have. Rifleman is also very important. I think the questionable part of this turn perhaps is the theology. I didn't need it yet. I mean, it frees up this population, but I'm not doing anything with it anyway. So, I think another path for me, there's still one organized religion left in the deck. The Gandon might want it, though. Yeah, so Gandon could take the second organized religion. So I might end up depending on theologies. It might be a little difficult to do for the rest of the game, but maybe I'll find some other happy faces such as theaters later too. But it is possible that if I get an organized religion, this will end up being a wasted 2 science and 1 civil action, and maybe I could have spent those 2 civil actions on this urban growth instead, which I will also almost certainly end up using on something later in this game. So, but this is definitely safer, especially if I don't get the organized religion or something I want to do anyway. And the urban growth for 2 is a little expensive, but it might still be good. But I also have to still be a little civil action conscious with being on 6. So I think it's probably a close decision looking back. As for what I discarded, I definitely wanted to discard the Iconoclasm. I do not want to lose Nobel before I get the Nobel Prizes going with me having so much science and so much science income. And I think I also discard the Crime Wave because, again, it's looking like I probably will be weakest for the foreseeable future. And all these cards are pretty important, probably, especially if there's another colony coming. I draw an Acceptance of Supremacy, a Plunder, and a Fortifications tactic, the tactic definitely being by far the most notable of those cards. Gandon now offers me the Scientific Cooperation Pact. Of course, I pretty much instantly accepted this. It's kind of interesting that Gandon chose to offer it to me, not Fantrick. Perhaps Gandon felt that I would be more likely to accept. I mean, I definitely, you know, there's no reason for me not to accept having so much science and so much science income. The pact will very likely be a lot better for me than it will be for Gandon. Maybe Gandon thought that Fantrick would not be willing to accept the pact, although I think Fantrick probably would have, just because Gandon is spending so much science on this Conmon. So Fantrick would probably be able to get a lot of use out of it. Gandon will struggle a little bit to get more use out of it. I mean, it will, for example, let him play the Conmon and their Jama this turn, which he might want to do. So there's maybe a reason for Fantrick to refuse, but if I were Fantrick, I probably would accept it. Anyway, though, I was definitely happy that he offered it to me. Will be very powerful pact for me. Takes the breakthrough to help him with this scientific cooperation pact, and because he still needs a fair amount of science, takes an efficient upgrade. Will want to upgrade farms eventually. The 2 scientific breedings are coming quite late for my opponents, so me being on irrigations is looking extra good right now. And he also takes another urban growth, again, and taking a lot of yellow cards in this game. But the urban growth will probably be able to be used on the dramas. And he upgrades one of his warriors to tie Fantric and Strength, and with his last level action, preemptively plays the reserves for rocks. Fantric Seeds reveals the Ravagers of Time I seeded earlier. Finishes the Suez Canal. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the autonomous territory. He has the developed territory too, which is also a very strong territory in Fairness. Takes Maria. Maria, definitely quite a good leader in 3-player games, although he might not be able to use her resources next turn at least, because he's tied in strength with Gandon. Unfortunately, doesn't have the food income going for her that you might have liked with her, but Fantric should be able to get a scientific breeding probably next turn. And the alternative leaders to potentially wait for would be Shakespeare and Newton. Fantric is not set up for Shakespeare at all. Newton would be pretty good, but probably Maria, even with these late farms, will probably be about as good as Newton. And he also takes a second copy of Rifleman and a copy of Opera. Well, he could have potentially maybe taken an Opera and a Journalism and then planned for Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is maybe looking ambitious. It would take a few turns to get going. By then, he'll probably want an H3 leader anyway. So Maria is a pretty good, maybe more transitional leader. So I didn't have anything to see. I don't want to offer my the pact. I don't need to. I upgrade my last coal mine. Take the Cavalryman. Now, I just tried the fortification deck that I might want. But I am also both fairly heavily invested in warriors already, and also Gandon could definitely take the second copy of cannons. I think if it shows up on his turn, he's very likely to take it with all the civil actions. So, and with being on Great Wall. So I figured that if I don't get the cannons, I will want to use the Conquistador's tactics, so I'll need the Cavalryman. I also took a Frugality, even though it costs 2 civil actions. I thought that the food could definitely be quite useful for me, and still being on irrigations. Just, all the food I can get feels pretty important at this stage in the game. That leaves me with 2 civil actions left. Maybe some options for me. I could, for example, build another library, but that probably feels a little late. This population probably needs to go into military instead of a library. And so instead, what I ended up taking was this organized religion. Definitely feels bad to take organized religion when I already have theologies going, but it's all right. It'll at least only cost 2 science thanks to the Scientific Cooperation Pact, and it'll also help me with my biggest issue right now, which is my population. Having the organized religion means I'll only be able to likely devote 1 less population into happy face buildings, and with my somewhat limited population at the moment, that could definitely be very helpful. So I think that this is a good guy to take. It just makes the theology play last turn definitely look worse, and it's the second game in a row where I'll have build organized religions after having built a theology the previous turn. So it doesn't look great, but I think it's all right here. There's also a small benefit in that it maybe will be bad for Gandon. Gandon probably would have liked the organized religion to help with happy faces. Now it'll be potentially harder for Gandon to build happy faces. So there's a denial aspect to this as well. I discard the Age 1 bonus card and the Pact, and I think another bonus card I really wanted to keep. This was kind of a tough decision for me. Obviously, I can only keep 1 fewer card. This probably would have preferred the library to be destroyed a bit later than it was, but it is what it is. I basically had to choose between a bonus card and one of these tactics, and I thought that both tactics I could potentially end up wanting. Again, if Gandon takes the cannons, I'll need the Conquistadors, but if I get the second copy of cannons, it could very well just go into fortifications. So I thought leaving myself the option of either tactic was more important than keeping the second bonus card. I'm drawing Prosperity and 2 more tactics, so I'm getting all the H2 tactics it looks like in this game. Gandon Seeds reveals an economic progress. I think maybe that was the card I seeded actually, because I was looking forward to having coal mines. Definitely helps me more than my opponents. So Gandon now elects Bach before the age ends, plays the drama, also was able to upgrade 2 farms along with the efficient upgrade. Unfortunately, though, as a result of the, I think as a result of the efficient upgrade, because that saved 3 rocks. So I guess he would have been in corruption even without the efficient upgrade. We can see here that Gandon had strong resource production, but having relatively poor science, is struggling a bit to find ways to spend that resources. It also doesn't help that the ocean liner service as a power wonder was available so late. Perhaps Gandon could have considered taking the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, even though those are typically considered less good wonders just as a rock sink. Also adapts the Legion tactic now that he's lost Genghis. H3 begins. I unfortunately, as stated previously, ended up losing that engineering genius, so it ended up, in the end, it would have been better for me to play the engineering genius than the Universalis, but again, I thought that the chances, it only cost me 1 rock though, so not the biggest deal. Anyway, Fantric, unfortunately, as a result of his choice to not play Maria next turn, maybe Fantric should have looked at me and Gan having so many civil actions that there was a chance that the age could end like it did, and so he ends up losing a civil action for that. At least he has a lot of civil actions to spend. It takes the scientific breeding for 3 civil actions. I think that is worth it because, especially with Maria, Fantric really wants food right now. So I think this turn makes sense from him. Does mean that he passes up on the ocean liner service, though. Though this late ocean liner service, as I'll discuss more in my turn, is definitely less appealing. I did I wanted this cannon though, for reasons stated previously. I am now finally able to fix my strength situation. I was pretty fortunate that neither of my opponents really found a way to push strength. I think mainly because the scientific breedings were so late. Because those scientific breedings were so late, neither of my opponents really had the opportunity to push strength much more. They also probably didn't draw, only drew 1 or 0 tactics because I drew so many tactics. So the order of the cards, both on the card row and the event deck, meant that even though I stayed on 7 strength for pretty much the entirety of H2, I ended up not being punished almost at all for it, just 1 strength event in the deck. So that was lucky for me. But anyway, after I upgrade my temple, I am able to build 2 cannons and play my fortifications tactic, actually making me strongest now. So I think that, yeah, I think this was more important than anything else I could have taken from the row. Wheel of Nationalism, maybe the hardest card to pass up, but I just didn't see an opportunity for it, and also I have a ton of rock income anyway, so it's less important for me. Ocean Liner Service may be a surprising pass up, but I think that when the Ocean Liner Service is so late like this, the value becomes a lot less because it gives you value so slowly over multiple turns. So when you're bidding it like at the beginning of age 3 or like 2 turns into age 3 like I would have, maybe you'll only end up using it say 4 times, which is still fine, but it's not like overwhelming value like it usually gives you. It's just like decent value. And so I figured that again, especially with me still only being on 6 civil actions, it was more important to do to fix my strength situation. I decide to only keep the... now that I've invested into cannons, I figured that the defensive army is the only one of those tactics that I might want to use instead of fortifications. So I keep that among the tactics along with the prosperity, which was definitely looking like a potentially good seed for me. I didn't seed it this turn because I went from weakest to strongest. Gandon does seed, reveals a terrorism, likely seeded by Fantric. Almost certainly seeded by Fantric. Increases population to build a theater with the urban growth to get some more culture production going. I forgot to do an age 3 breakthrough. I'll do that after Fantric's turn. Again, is willing to take the Ocean Liner Service, though. Like I said, it should at least still be decent value. On the other hand, as a cost of spending all these 3 civil actions on the Ocean Liner Service, Gandon is still going to be in corruption on this turn. Maybe didn't find a way to be out of corruption regardless, though. It does mean that he won't have an open wonder slot, though, for the Manhattan Project, for example. So I'm not too sure about the Ocean Liner Service being this late, but it is a good wonder. Fantric seeds, reveals the National Pride, likely seeded by Gandon. Actually, that one might have been the one that I seeded, come to think of it, because I had good culture income and even if you lose national pride, it's only like a 3 culture swing since you got 2 culture from seeding it. So that might have been me, but I think I had the economic progress. Anyway, Fantrick builds a cannon for himself and takes military theory. That's definitely a very important card for him to fix his military action. So good to get that so early into age 3. And with his last civil action, it increases his population. This turn makes sense to me. Fantrick is now the strongest. Despite Fantrick being the strongest, I still want to see the prosperity. I think now Fantrick destroyed my temple with his terrorism, but I will be fixing my happy face situation later, and I figure that, you know, I might have more happy faces than my opponents, but even if I don't, I will probably need the food more than them since I'm on irrigation. So I was happy to see that, and at least I'm not weakest right now. I revealed an inhabited territory, so I was rewarded in seeding it, especially since I actually win the inhabited territory. I think I bid all 3 warriors plus a cannon and a bonus card. That since I don't need these warriors, and I probably won't want these. Don't need these warriors anyway, since I'm just gonna be living off of fortifications now. Probably, I was willing to send them all away as well as a cannon to get this territory, which the yellow tokens will help me out a lot, I think. And I am able to win it, in fact, only for 2 of the warriors plus the cannon and the bonus card. So I think I definitely was very perhaps Fantrick didn't have a lot of bonus cards to bid into it. You know, he might have been able to bid like an entire army, his entire army though, because he could then on his turn switch to fortifications. So I might have done that in Fantrick's position. Anyway though, the cost though of doing this is that I obviously lose all the cards in my hand, and so I will have to now spend the rest of my turn being able to defend myself, which I can do by building 3 cannons. This does, however, mean that I am unable to draw any cards this turn, which is definitely a huge cost, but I think it's necessary. So now the question is that I've spent all those rocks on cannons. I have a lot of civil actions with not much to do with them except take cards. At least I don't have to fix my happy faces yet, thanks to the inhabited territory, though I know that the prosperity is on the deck, so I have some incentive to get happy faces. I end up taking the movies, though. I think there are a couple reasons for this. At this point in the game... Oh, I forgot to do the overview. Let me do the overview. So, Ganon is currently ahead in culture and culture production, not by a lot, though. I'm far to my opponents in science and rocks. They're a bit ahead of me in food, though, but obviously that colony is helping my food situation out a lot. And the civil and military action situation, I'm a bit lower than my opponents, but not by too much. So it's definitely feeling quite good about my position right now, especially my science and my rocks. But there's a question of how am I going to win this game? With me having spent all these military actions, only having 3, Fantrick got the first copy of military theory. Maybe I'll get the second, or the fundamentalism, but it's hard to guarantee that. I wasn't sure about being able to win militarily. I mean, I definitely could, but I, you know, am not getting any draws this turn. I forget, yeah. Last turn, obviously, I didn't draw any wars. Yeah, I didn't draw any cards last turn. I'm not drawing any cards this turn, so I'm not getting a lot of draws for either tactics or wars. So because I'm spending all my military actions, it would be, I think, really risky to depend upon winning this game, overtaking Ganon, fending off Fantrick by going militarily. So I felt that for me, a peaceful victory would be a lot safer, and I definitely felt able to do it. Again, I'm not that far behind in Ganon in culture right now, and I have a lot more science income than he does particularly, and also some more rock income. And I'm also in a much better strength situation than Ganon is. Although Ganon maybe will take Gandhi to be safer in terms of strength, but if Ganon takes Gandhi, then Ganon's only getting 2 culture a turn from his H3 leader, whereas I could potentially get a lot more value out of the H3 leader I end up getting. So I felt that a peaceful win in this situation was definitely highly possible, and movies will help a lot with that. There's a fair amount of synergy with movies. I mean, there's already Chaplin on the row. Now, maybe Fantrick would take Chaplin because he has Opera, but Chaplin with Opera isn't that great. Fantrick might have preferred getting a different leader anyway, and is just taking that as a denial. And even if I don't get Chaplin, there is still a Hollywood in the game that I could end up getting potentially. And even if I don't get either, movies are still a great way to get culture peacefully. And I thought that I definitely have the science and the resources to support the movies. Question is what to take with them. One card I take with them is the urban growth to help support getting more movies. You know, even with only 9 rocks and also this architecture that will also help me build movies. It still might be a little hard to get the resources to take the movies, but with the architecture and the urban growth, it felt very reasonable for me to get at least 2 movies. The question then is what to spend the last civil action on, and I think maybe I should have highly considered something. I end up just playing the architecture preemptively. It doesn't really... there isn't really I want to cost Ganon the science reason for it. I think it was just a civil action reason. But I think one card that I maybe didn't consider as much as I should have this turn is the mechanized agriculture. Still pretty early into age 3. And if my food situation is still, even though I win the colony and have the prosperity in the deck, I think maybe I was thinking because I won the colony, because there's the prosperity in the deck, I maybe won't need the extra food, but the food will still disappear relatively quickly. And early mechanized agriculture income upgrades could fix kind of the only remaining weak point in my civilization, which is my food income. I could give me a lot more food to put into movies, or, you know, maybe military if I end up needing to defend against Fantric. So I think actually the mechanized agriculture, taking it would have been a better decision than preemptively playing the architecture. Ganon sees an impact, reveals a Cold War. Thankfully, I'm a party to it, gives me even more science to play with. Ganon finished the Lunar Line service, does take Gandhi. Ganon, it's looking pretty difficult for Ganon to get strength. Both Fantric and I are threatening a fair amount of it, so it makes sense that Ganon wants the Gandhi to hopefully ride this culture lead to victory. And with his last 2 civil actions, 6 computers, perhaps an indication that this was an impact of science that was seeded. Unfortunately, Ganon is still in corruption, though, is not willing to go out of corruption by building another swordsman, so that's a weakness of this line. Well, I feel that these 2 turns of corruption are more weakness of having taken the Ocean Line of service. Fantric sees reveals an immigration, doesn't hit anyone. Fantric builds a second cannon, does take Chaplain, at least it's going to be a decent leader for him, and obviously a denial for me. Builds an opera with him, is now at 8 culture income. Disbands a warrior to build a 3rd farm, notably. Perhaps this means, when I saw this, I was wondering maybe Ganon had seeded an impact of agriculture. Although it could just be that he wants more population to put into urban buildings or something. Also takes the reserves and a military build-up. So perhaps an indication that he's pushing military, although perhaps taking the Manhattan Project would have been good if it's pushing military. It's also notable that Fantric has is choosing not to upgrade this last mine. I mean, with the Suez Canal, maybe it's not necessary, but it's notable. So a card is available on the road that I really wanted, which is communism. Well, along with my food, I guess the last real issue with my civilization was my civil and military actions, which wasn't bad, but wasn't great. This combination does help that immediately. Maybe I would have preferred the democracy in a vacuum, but the communism is available right now. And also the extra military actions and rock from the communism could definitely end up being as useful as the extra culture from the democracy. Anyway, I definitely wanted the communism. Even though there's the prosperity in the deck, I think it's just too good to get those extra civil actions and military actions going now. I don't think I won't use the military action this turn. Because instead, well, I'll use one of the military actions to Disbanded Warrior, so I can build a movies. I don't necessarily see much more important things to do on my turn. It also, you know, I think that since I'm definitely aiming to win peacefully now, I was a little worried. I'm now 20 culture behind Ganon, which is not a huge amount, but you know, if I let that lead grow, then it'll become harder and harder to get back, especially with Ganon having Gandhi. It's looking pretty much impossible for me to war Ganon in this game. So I really need to catch up to Ganon peacefully. Getting the theater this turn really helps me with that. I don't necessarily see much else I want to spend my resources on, especially since I'm currently strongest. So that leaves me with 2 civil actions left, which I spend. The engineering genius could definitely be very helpful to finish a Hollywood or perhaps an Empire State Building easier. Another reason, by the way, to take the mechanized agriculture, which I do end up taking. So we can see why I mentioned that last turn, because I end up taking this copy this turn. So it ended up not costing me that much, but another great reason to take the mechanized agriculture is because there's an Empire State Building in the game. If I don't get the Hollywood, I'll definitely want one of these other wonders. and the mechanized agriculture helps a lot with both Empire State Building and the Red Cross. And so I think it's actually like a really important technology for me that I really should have taken last turn, but I wasn't punished for it. I'm able to take it this turn instead. And at least I have a pretty good use of the last of action, the sufficient upgrade, which will let me upgrade the mechanized agriculture for free. I draw a military alliance and impact of happiness, which could definitely be a good impact for me, as well as an armed intervention. Okay, then seeds another impact, reveals a freedom of movement. So this time I was kind of punished for disbanding my warrior. Oh well. Gandon builds a second drama, increased population with Ocean Liner to build a fourth swordsman, and takes an urban growth and an air forces. Air forces maybe not necessary because technically neither Fantric nor I can war him right now, but Fantric could potentially maybe get a fundamentalism next turn. I could maybe get the second military theory. So if things develop a certain way, it could definitely be possible for one of us to war Gandon. So the Air Forces is definitely helping him stay safe from that possibility. Fantric Seeds reveals the civil unrest, doesn't affect anyone. So Gandon uses a freedom of movement to move a worker from swordsman to alchemy and then rebuild that swordsman. So this basically just saved him a civil action. Fantric moves the worker from bread and circuses to opera, so doesn't need the happy faces anymore because he's getting them from the opera and from chaplain, but this doesn't mean he'll get one less food from the prosperity at least. Increases population, plays reserves for rocks to enable him to build another opera. So Fantric now has the most culture income, actually. It's good and is going to be able to catch up to Gandon and overtake me, as a matter of fact. And Gandon, Fantric takes the second copy of Air Forces, so unfortunately I will be the player without Air Forces in this game. At least I wasn't aiming for a military victory anyway. And takes an Engineering Genius. Definitely a very nice card to have, especially for one civil action. I offer the military alliance to Gandon. Again, as I said earlier, I was planning for a peaceful victory, especially now that I am not getting air forces. I could see the impact of happiness, but the problem is that the next event deck is full of only impacts, and so it is. And so, while I will be getting more happy faces this turn, as we'll see, I will still have a chance to get even more happy faces later. So it would probably and my opponents maybe are not that incentivized to get more happy faces. So I thought that it would be nice to have the impact of happiness in the following event deck and not this one. But also, I think the military theory is just the military alliance is a nice one to have. Not only because it gives me a little bit of extra strength and makes me a little bit safer from any military designs Fantric might have, but I thought that was also good for me for Gandon to get the strength. Because with me not having air forces, me warring Gandon really looks out of the picture. But Fantric, on the other hand, might be able to. I mean, he doesn't take the fundamentalism, but Fantric, you know, maybe has like a hybrid war or something. Or even without a war, maybe Fantric could push strength and get some aggressions going or something. So, or maybe even Fantric's last stage 2 card could possibly be an infiltrate, although, you know, maybe if it was, Fantric would have pushed strength earlier. But anyway, just to make sure Fantric can't get any military designs in Gandon, I thought giving Gandon extra strength was also good for me. Anyway, I increased my population so that I can take Mandela. I think of the remaining leaders in the game, Mandela is definitely the best for me. Einstein and Sid Meier. I mean, Einstein maybe could be okay if I get some multimedias. Sid Meier looks impossible at this point, especially since I used freedom of movement to move from philosophy to canon. This was a little bit disappointing. I would have preferred to move from philosophy to movies, but if I had done that, then I wouldn't have been able to take Mandela for cheap this turn. So I decided to just get rid of this philosophy that I don't really need anymore, and, you know, get a little bit of extra strength with it instead. Churchill could be okay, but I think Mandela is really good for me. The actual civil action, of course, is helpful, but I'm also in a position, because of the colony I won, to get a lot of extra culture from Mandela. As we'll see this turn, I am able, after building a temple directly with Mandela, right? An organized religion is basically like a cheap movies. Because, as we can, well, I guess, a cheap opera, technically. But it's still obviously good for me, not just because Mandela is giving me extra culture from the happy faces, but also because it'll give me more food from the prosperity, and also because I have the impact of happiness in my hand. Definitely thought this religion was good to build. I also retain enough rocks to build a second theater along with it, which obviously, you know, again with Mandela, this movies is basically giving me 5 culture a turn. So Mandela's, or another way of looking at it is Mandela is giving me 5 culture a turn currently, which is obviously really good, along with the civil action. So I think Mandela is just really, really, really strong for me right now. So definitely a good lead to take. I made sure not to play any text this turn because I want to get a Nobel Prize next turn. So after doing this, I just take the revolutionary idea to, again, help with potential Nobel Prizes. You know, there's not necessarily any more text I really need other than maybe mechanized agriculture, but like I said, this will help me. This will maybe represent 4 extra culture from a Nobel Prize. I didn't really want any of these other cards. I draw a hybrid war, which technically means I could have warred Gandon, but I didn't know I would draw it, obviously, as well as a what's this called again? International Tourism Pact. Again, it doesn't see it. Instead, upgrades a lab. Again, you know, upgrades a lab to computers and a theater. So again, this is kind of heavily suggesting to me that Gandon seeded impact of science, because without a science age 3 leader, there's, I think, no other real reason to build those computers. And he also takes the fundamentalism, perhaps just for an extra layer of protection. Unfortunately, one thing I wasn't able to do last turn was take the Hollywood that was on the row. It was on this part of the row, and I just thought it was too expensive. I wasn't able to do that and do other things I really wanted to do this turn. So unfortunately, it means that Fantrick is able to take it himself. It is a good wonder for him, but I think that both International Red Cross and Empire State Building should be good wonders for me. So even though I do lose on the Hollywood, which would maybe be the best wonder for me, I have good other options as well. Fantrick also takes a copy of tanks, builds a 3rd cannon, and a copy of reserves. At least I'm still strongest. So I know that that's the prosperity, and now I have a lot of happy faces, so I'm happy, get it, to see the impact of happiness. Reveal that prosperity, I get 1 more food from it than my opponents do. This was a difficult turn for me. So this is almost certainly going to be the second to last turn in the game. So I kind of have two major things I have to keep in mind. First of all, I obviously am really aiming to get one of these wonders. So I need to set myself up for getting either one of them, though, because I don't know, like, where they'll be. So if one of them is, like, here and the other one is here, for example, I'll probably want the one that's here. And so I want to set myself up for potentially either wonder. So along with setting myself up for either one of those, I also need to set my... figure out what I want to do with my civilization to increase my culture production and also set myself up better for impacts. And so I spent a fair amount of time on this turn playing through various options, and what I ended up deciding that I really to do was take this multimedia and upgrade one of it. And there's a very particular reason for that. I mean, it does give me an extra 2 culture income, but I mean, I could have gotten more culture from building a movies, for example, and that would also give me a happy face for impact of happiness. I built this multimedia instead because, as I said previously, it was looking very likely to me that Gandon had seeded an impact of science with having built this computer that is not really doing anything else for him. And Fantrick is currently on 4 science production, meaning that with this upgrade to multimedia putting me at 5, I will now win the impact of science if it comes out. And that's just such a huge swing against Fantrick. It's a 14-point swing. I thought that was like avoiding, you know, that enabling me to get that 14-point swing, or like avoiding the risk of Fantrick getting that 14-point swing, was just super important to me. I am currently ahead in Fantrick in culture and in culture production. And like I said, I thought that both of the potential remaining wonders were good for me. So I felt that I was currently ahead of Fantrick. And I didn't want to... So Fantrick winning the impact of science over me is maybe one way that Fantrick could beat me in this game. And I wanted to avoid that happening. So I thought that was a very important... So I thought that was a necessary thing for me to do. As for the other things I do, in order to set myself up for the wonders, first of all, I the revolutionary idea lets me play the mechanized agriculture as well as the multimedia this turn, so it ends up being a very important revolutionary idea, also giving me a Nobel Prize. And I upgrade 1 farm, and I take this reserves. So at this point, next turn I will be on 14 food and 15 rocks, meaning that I can play the reserves for food and finish the Red Cross in 1 turn, and I can also alternately play it for rocks and finish the Empire State Building next turn. So again, the flexibility of the reserves coming in extremely clutch for me, enabling me to leave myself open to either wonder next turn. As for my remaining 2 civil actions, take an efficient upgrade. I'm not going to upgrade my 2nd farm this turn because I need to save those rocks for potential Empire State Building. So instead I take the efficient upgrade that will let me potentially upgrade the farm for free. It won't be useful in terms of food production, but again, I felt that Fantric having 3 farms, impact of agriculture, seemed reasonably likely. So this would, if that is in the deck, this would give me +3 for impact of agriculture. And with my final civil action, I just upgrade a temple. This will give me an extra +1 culture from Mandela, and also an extra +2 culture from the Impact of Happiness. So I didn't really, the endowment of the arts isn't going to be good for me, so I think there wasn't really anything better to do. I will have enough civil actions next turn to do everything I want to do, even without, well, I couldn't preemptively play those reserves anyway, so. Yeah, looking back on it, I do think I ended up figuring out the best turn for me. Oh, and I didn't offer the International Tourism Pact because, partly because I wanted to keep the Military Alliance, just in case there might be an Impact of Strength in the deck. I mean, probably unlikely if Fantric got seeded Impact of Strength, probably would have pushed Strength more, but, also because, the major reason I didn't offer International Tourism is it actually wasn't clear to me which of my opponents was the bigger threat, because Ganon is ahead in culture right now by 18, but Fantric has the Hollywood, so I thought that my opponents were kind of equally threatening, and I wasn't sure which of them, was in a stronger position. And so that combined with, not necessarily wanting to lose the military alliance. I mean, losing the military alliance could also potentially maybe leave Ganon open to an aggression from Fantric or something. So I just felt that without knowing which opponent was the bigger threat, I wanted to keep the tourism pact in my hand. I draw an Impact of Strength. I draw the Impact of Strength, though, that I was a little bit afraid of, as well as an Impact of Progress. Impact of Progress probably going to be more useful for me, potentially. Ganon seeds, and I was right on my read. Ganon had seeded the Impact of Science, and so by upgrading that multimedia, I am able to achieve a 14 culture swing against Fantric, which could end up being the difference in the game. So I was very happy with my previous turn when I saw that card being revealed. Anyway, Ganon has just enough science to play Democracy this turn. He's able to get 2 more population, builds a 4th theater, plays the Revolutionary Idea. I think that's the Revolutionary Idea 2, yeah, so before the end of the age. And takes the rockets, maybe just for, to aim for a Nobel Prize or something. Although, yeah, actually, Ganon had enough science to play this Cavalryman. So, I think probably Ganon should have played this Cavalryman just to win the Nobel Prize. I'm not sure if any of these cards would be a particularly helpful play. I mean, I guess the military theory would, but Impact of Progress, but he doesn't know I have that. But yeah, I think winning the Nobel Prize maybe would have been better than these cards would be. Maybe it's about the same, though. Anyway, Fantric takes the second copy of Democracy, so my opponents both got Democracies, at least they're both pretty late. But we can also see again and made sure to make Fantric unable to prolong the game. Maybe that's another reason that... I guess that's probably the major reason that Ganon played that turn the way he did. He wanted to make sure Fantric couldn't prolong the game, because the longer the game goes on, probably the better for Fantric. Ganon, having the culture lead right now, wants to end the game as soon as possible. Fantric is able to play the military build-up for 5 rocks to build a cannon for free, to timing and strength, and builds a 4th theater to now have the most culture production for right now. Takes a patriotism and plays with an even the outdated mechanized army tactic makes it so that Fantric is ahead of me in strength. But luckily I drew the Impact of Strength, so I know it's not in the deck. Age 4 begins. I am not gonna end up being ahead of Fantric in strength at the end of my turn, and the impact of progress is gonna help me more than it'll help Ganon anyway. So again, with me not knowing necessarily whether Ganon or Fantric was in the better position, but maybe we can quickly take a look. An impact of population is revealed. It helps me less than it helps my opponents. But I did think that Fantric next turn will be able to get a 30 culture movie. So I'll put him up to 162 culture, even without any other considerations. Well, okay, that was after the impact population was real, but and Ganon will be at pretty similar culture to 162, 159, but I did think that Fantric was much better set up for impacts than Ganon was. So for that reason, I thought that Fantric was more likely to be my main competition than Ganon. And that's why I didn't want to see the impact of strength, because even though that would give me 7 strength against Ganon, I didn't want to give Fantric 7 strength against me. The impact of progress is a more equal event. So the both wonders are obviously on the row for me, but I decided to take the International Red Cross. I think not only is it available for 1 civil action cheaper, I mean that civil action is exchanged for the civil action it'll take to the 2 it'll take to build that Red Cross. But more importantly, it only costs food instead of rocks, which means I will be able to instead spend my rocks on urban buildings. So by playing reserves for food, I'm able to finish the Red Cross. Another reason Red Cross over Empire State is because Fantric was able to push strength and culture. I would actually only be able to win the Empire State Building for 18, whereas I can win the Red Cross obviously for 33. So Red Cross definitely the right choice for me right now. Oh, I guess I failed to mention, but one reason why I took the architecture so much earlier was not only it made my movies cheaper, but also whenever there's a Red Cross in the game, that makes architecture and engineering much, much better cards because of how it's almost impossible to finish the Red Cross on the turn you take it without one of them, but with one of them it's a lot easier, as we can see. So, I do think architecture in particular is a much better card when Red Cross is in the game. Anyway, though, I disbanded Cannon. I'm not vulnerable to an aggression from Fantric even without it. So I know Impact of Strength is in the deck. And also knowing that, so I figured that even though this might cost me Impact of Competition, I would rather lost the Cannon than one of my other buildings, which could help me for more impacts, such as, probably not an impact of industry was seeded, but maybe an impact of balance or an impact of agriculture or something like that. But yeah, I built another theater just to get both more culture and another happy face for Mandela and the impact of happiness. I do upgrade my last farm again, pretty much only for impact of agriculture. I didn't need to use my efficient upgrade on it, but I did anyway for fun. And with my last civil action, I took the revolutionary idea. Unfortunately, I mean, I could have tried to build a 3rd religion, but if I lost another cannon, I would be vulnerable to an aggression. I didn't want to lose either, and I didn't have enough civil actions to destroy one of these. I mean, I could have if I didn't upgrade that farm, but I didn't really. I wanted to upgrade the farm because I still thought that Impact of Agriculture was pretty likely from Fantric, so I thought that this was just the most balanced way to go about it. Ganon Seeds reveal, and there is an impact of balance in the deck after all, which Ganon, probably seeded by Ganon, he ends up winning it by a little bit, but at least I have a decent one myself. Ganon plays the military theory, perhaps suggesting because there's an impact of variety or an impact of government. Builds a farm, maybe Ganon probably also suspecting this impact of agriculture seeded by either me or Fantric, and also builds 2 more temples, so Ganon ends the game with 4 dramas and 4 religions, which is not something you see every day for sure. It's kind of funny. There's obviously helpful impact of happiness and also a little bit of extra culture income. Fantric Seeds reveals the impact of happiness I played. Ganon and I both get 16 from it. Fantric gets a little bit less at 12. Plays the reserves for rocks, which with the engineering genius lets him get 30 culture from the Hollywood, and just increase the population twice and plays the pictures of them. Maybe suggesting he sees the impact of competition, or maybe just didn't have anything better to do with his resources. And takes the engineering. So before the final impacts are revealed, we can see that I ended up with 209 culture, so that's 16 ahead of Gandon, who in turn is 8 ahead of Fantrick. So 16 is a somewhat sensible amount, but definitely not decisive, and obviously 8 isn't that much either. So even though I'm ahead right now, the final impacts, definitely anyone could still win or lose depending on the final impacts in the deck. So I was very nervous looking at them. The first impact is the active colonies. It's good for Fantrick, but at least not by that much. The second impact is the one I see, the impact of progress. We can see that it gives me +2 against Ganon, but Fantrick +2 against me. With the culture from seeing it, I end up being +1 for me against Fantrick, at least. But it does put Fantrick ahead of Gandon, but it's still, I still have a somewhat sensible lead, but still not that much. I think 19 ahead of Fantrick. The next impact, though, is the impact of culture, and this one, presumably seeded by Gandon, meant that it's pretty decisive, looking very difficult for any of my opponents to catch up with me now. So the final 2 impacts would just decide who gets second and third. The next one is an impact of competition, which looks like be seeded by Fantrick almost certainly, so Fantrick is now ahead of Gandon by 4 points. And the last one is the impact of government, probably seeded by Gandon, having played the military theory, but only gives them an equal amount of culture to Fantrick, and so Fantrick ends up I end up winning by 31 points, and Fantrick is in second by 4 points. Overall, looking back, I'm quite satisfied with how I played this game. I do think I was fortunate in a number of ways. In particular, I think the lateness of the selective breedings really hurt my opponents. And also the fact that it looks like neither of them drew any H2 tactics. The combination of those two factors means that even though I was weakest for a prolonged period of time, pretty much the entirety of H2, my opponents were not able to get the population or the tactics necessary to really punish me for being relatively weak. There weren't even that many strength events that were seeded. I think only a couple, maybe one, maybe 2. And so, for that reason, my somewhat greedy play of being weakest for a while in H2 helped out a lot, obviously, by that early Nobel. I was able to focus instead on my economy throughout the entirety of H2, and then by the beginning of H3, when I was able to fix my strength situation, I had a strong enough economy that I was able to build up all of these great urban buildings. Mandela also gave me a ton of culture, and I could set myself up for a big red cross that ended up enabling me to win the game fairly decisively. Definitely a lot went right for me in this game in terms of the event deck and the card row, but I think I also was able to take advantage of that and played well. I think I took, going back over this, you can always look at mistakes that I made, but I didn't necessarily notice any huge glaring ones, except maybe, again, playing that theology early when I perhaps didn't have to, but I think that is at least a defensible play because the organized religion could have been taken by Gandon too, so... aside from that, though, I think I played well, and especially I think I was proud of my second to last turn, the way I played it, not only enabling me to get second in Impact of Science, but also setting me up for either Wonder. So I think especially in Age 3, I feel like I played Age 3 quite well, and I was able to utilize my strong economy to get this win. So after that game, we can take a look at the situation in the group. Weidenbaum and me are currently tied at 6 points after my win, but Weidenbaum obviously has only played 1 game and I've played 2, so Weidenbaum is ahead of me in that sense, but at least I'm now ahead of Gandon and Fantrick without each having the same amount of games played. So my victory in this game definitely offset my third place showing in the first 4-player game, and it means that if I am able to play well enough in the remaining 4-player game and in the 2 3-player games, or maybe even if I don't do well in 1 or 2 of those, but I do well in the 2-player games, obviously I'm in a position to still win this group. So very important win for me, but there's a lot more in the group left to play. The next game I will be covering is a game that you might have already seen because Weidenbaum made a video on it. It's the second 4-player game played in this group. It's definitely a, shall we say, an interesting game from my perspective. So I hope you are looking forward to it. As always, please leave a comment if you have any observations or criticism of either my play or my video making. I'm very much looking to improve constantly in both areas. Regardless, though, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.